It started like any ordinary morning on the ranch. The sun peeked over the horizon, painting the fields in soft gold, and my wife was already at her desk in the home office, immersed in emails and administrative reports. The tranquility of the property was a stark contrast to the chaos that was about to unfold. At precisely 9 a.m., the familiar figure of HOA Karen appeared at the edge of the driveway, her heels clicking against the pavement with the kind of self-importance that could be heard from a mile away. She clutched her phone like a lifeline, ready to summon any authority she could imagine. Today, her target was my wife. Karen had long nursed a vendetta against us, constantly testing boundaries, imagining that HOA rules granted her powers over everyone else's lives. Karen began knocking on the front door with exaggerated force, yelling our names as if we were supposed to leap to attention the instant she arrived. My wife, fully aware of Karen's presence, ignored the pounding entirely, choosing instead to focus on her work. She wasn't being rude. She was being smart. Karen thrived on reactions, and giving her one would only fuel her sense of power. Frustrated, Karen dialed 911, her voice trembling with indignation as she reported that my wife was refusing lawful entry and obstructing the HOA's authority. She painted a picture of herself as a beleaguered citizen forced to take drastic action against a rebellious homeowner. She imagined a dramatic showdown, perhaps with officers demanding my wife step aside, maybe even issuing citations or arresting her on the spot. What Karen didn't know was that my wife was now the new police chief of the county, the very position that oversaw the officers being dispatched to her property. Within minutes, multiple patrol cars rolled up the driveway. Karen practically beamed, convinced that her call had triggered a chain of events that would finally bend us to her will. She flitted around in circles, phone in hand, gesturing wildly as the officers stepped out and began approaching the house. The moment was ripe for her imagined victory, but reality was about to deliver a harsh lesson. My wife greeted the officers calmly, exuding the quiet confidence of someone who commanded respect naturally. Karen, however, continued her tirade, spewing HOA rules and imagined legal obligations as if sheer volume could bend the law to her whim. The officers listened politely, a hint of confusion flickering across their faces. Then came the revelation. My wife, introducing herself formally with name and title, revealed that she was the police chief, the very authority figure in charge of the entire department. Recognition flashed in the officer's eyes immediately. Karen's smug smile faltered, replaced by an almost cartoonish expression of disbelief. Her elaborate plan, built on ignorance and entitlement, had collapsed instantaneously. She tried to argue, claiming she had the right to escalate matters, but my wife, with authority and calm precision, explained that there was no legal basis for the complaint. The officers, now fully aware of the situation, began taking notes on Karen's behavior, documenting what was essentially harassment. Karen attempted to record the encounter, likely hoping to manipulate it into a narrative of victimhood, but my wife's composure and legal authority left her powerless. She calmly instructed Karen to leave the property and reminded the officers that any further attempts to harass residents would be met with enforcement under the law. Karen's face turned a shade of red that no amount of lipstick could fix, realizing that her imagined power had no real standing here. The officers escorted Karen to her car, making it clear that she could not return without facing legal consequences. Karen muttered half-hearted threats, her once commanding tone reduced to pathetic murmurs. She drove off, leaving the driveway empty, her sense of invincibility shattered. The sound of her engine fading into the distance was oddly satisfying, a final punctuation on yet another of her failed HOA schemes. Once Karen was gone, my wife returned to her desk, reopening her laptop as if the entire ordeal had been nothing more than a minor inconvenience. She explained, almost apologetically, that these confrontations were inevitable with someone like Karen, but that every encounter further reinforced the importance of knowing your legal standing and using authority wisely. I nodded, marveling at her skill in handling what could have been a volatile situation without raising her voice or breaking a sweat. Word of the incident spread quickly through the HOA community. Neighbors who had witnessed Karen's antics were simultaneously shocked and delighted. They had long been wary of her overreach, but seeing her completely powerless against the new police chief was a revelation. Conversations around the neighborhood shifted from whispered complaints to public acknowledgement that Karen's authority was a fiction, one that could be effectively challenged with knowledge, calm, and legal backing. Over the following weeks, Karen's reputation suffered irreparable damage. Her constant posturing and bullying were no longer intimidating. They were laughable. New HOA members were cautious, some even questioning her suitability for the position, while longtime residents quietly celebrated the humiliation she had suffered. The lesson was clear: genuine authority, when exercised correctly, overrides entitlement, bluster, and imagined power. The ranch returned to its peaceful rhythm, with cattle grazing, the wind rustling the trees, and my wife completing her work uninterrupted. Karen's intrusion had served as yet another reminder that while HOA rules might allow for petty enforcement, they cannot overrule law, reason, or experience. The balance of power had been firmly restored, and the lesson was clear for anyone who might think they could intimidate my family with threats and calls to 911. By evening, the sun dipped behind the hills, casting long shadows across the ranch. The fields looked serene, a perfect contrast to the chaos Karen had tried to sow. And while her attempts to assert dominance would continue, one fact was indisputable. She would never again underestimate the authority of the police chief, who also happened to be my wife. Every visit, every complaint, every imagined slight was now met with the quiet knowledge that the law and my wife were firmly on our side.